Well, Broncos, things just got a whole lot more interesting behind the scenes in Denver, and we need to talk about a move that could mean much more than it looks like on the surface. At first glance, it seems like Ben Powers simply agreed to a contract restructure, but is that really all this is? Because when you start connecting the dots, it feels like this move could be the first sign that something much bigger is happening inside the organization. I truly want to see the Denver Broncos competing for the Super Bowl. Honestly, I believe this team is getting closer to taking that next step. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think this salary cap move is simply about planning for the future? Or do you believe the Broncos are creating room for another major signing or even a blockbuster trade before the season begins? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've been a Denver Broncos fan for more than 15 years, smash that like button. Alright, now let's talk about Ben Powers and why this story could completely change the way we look at what the Broncos might do next. Now let's get right into what happened, because this is much bigger than just one player restructuring his contract. Ben Powers agreed to take a pay cut after discussions with the Broncos organization. According to the information available, Denver first approached him earlier this year about reworking his contract before eventually reaching an agreement. While the exact financial details have not been officially released, reports surrounding the signing bonus have led many people to believe the Broncos created roughly $8 million in additional salary cap space. That is a significant amount of flexibility for the organization, and it immediately raises an obvious question. Why now? The first thing that stands out is the message this sends inside the locker room. Ben Powers could have simply kept the original terms of his contract, but instead he chose to work with the team. That kind of decision tells you something about the culture Denver is trying to build. Players believe in the direction of this organization, and they are willing to help create opportunities for the team to continue improving. That does not happen unless there is trust between the front office, the coaching staff, and the players themselves. Another interesting part of this story is how the restructure appears to work. The reports indicate that Powers receives more guaranteed money while accepting less total money overall. From the player's perspective, guaranteed money provides security. From the team's perspective, it creates valuable cap flexibility. It is one of those rare situations where both sides appear to benefit, and that makes this agreement even more meaningful. After this move, Denver is believed to have approximately $29 million in available salary cap space. That number immediately became one of the biggest talking points among Broncos fans because it creates multiple possibilities. The first option is the conservative approach. The Broncos could simply carry much of that available space into the next season, putting themselves in an even stronger financial position for the future. That would be the safe decision, and one that many successful organizations choose to make. But there is another possibility that naturally gets fans excited. If the Broncos suddenly have this much flexibility, could they be preparing to make another significant addition to the roster? Nobody can say for certain, but that question is now impossible to ignore. One name immediately entered the conversation after trade speculation began circulating. Vita Vea became part of the discussion because of reports that he requested a trade. There have also been reports suggesting preferred destinations elsewhere, but that has not stopped Broncos fans from imagining what a player of his caliber could bring to Denver's defensive front. Just imagine a defensive line featuring Zach Allen, DJ Jones, and Vita Vea together. Even though Vea and Jones primarily play similar positions, the thought of finding creative ways to use both players creates endless possibilities. Vea remains one of the league's most disruptive defensive linemen because he consistently commands double teams and creates opportunities for everyone around him. Recent statistics only reinforce that reputation. His pass rush productivity remains impressive, and opposing offensive lines continue dedicating multiple blockers to slowing him down. When one defensive lineman demands that much attention, everyone else benefits. Pass rush lanes open. One-on-one matchups become easier. Quarterbacks feel pressure much sooner. Even if nothing ever happens regarding a trade, it is easy to understand why fans immediately began imagining the possibilities once Denver created additional cap space. Of course, there is another perfectly reasonable explanation. General Manager George Paton and the Broncos may simply be positioning the franchise for long-term financial health. Having flexibility is never a bad thing, especially with future extensions and roster decisions always on the horizon. Sometimes the smartest move is the one that receives the least attention. While everyone continues discussing the salary cap situation, another major storyline begins today as Broncos players report for training camp. This is where conversations finally begin turning into actual football. Every practice matters. Every rep matters. Position battles start taking shape, and players have their first opportunity to prove they deserve larger roles. One of the biggest competitions to watch will be the battle for the second outside cornerback position involving Riley Moss and Jody Barron. This is one of the most fascinating storylines because Barron enters camp with tremendous talent but also something to prove. Last season did not fully showcase everything Broncos fans expected from him. That does not necessarily mean he struggled because of a lack of ability. Instead, much of the conversation revolves around how he was used. Rather than focusing on one consistent role, he spent time moving between multiple responsibilities. Versatility can certainly be valuable, but constantly changing positions can also make it difficult for any young player to master one specific assignment. Now there is hope that training camp provides a clearer vision. If the coaching staff allows Barron to settle into one defined role, fans may finally see the player many believe could become one of the best defensive backs from his draft class. His college production certainly supports that optimism. He consistently limited opposing receivers, prevented touchdowns, generated interceptions, and established himself as one of college football's premier defensive backs before arriving in Denver. Another major storyline involves Jalen Waddle's impact on the offense. After arriving in Denver, everyone naturally wants to see how Sean Payton incorporates a dynamic playmaker into this system. New additions always generate excitement during training camp because practices provide the first glimpse of how different the offense might look compared to last season. The linebacker group also deserves attention. Alex Singleton and Justin Strnad remain important veterans, but every training camp produces unexpected contributors. Younger players now have an opportunity to establish themselves and compete for meaningful defensive snaps. Depth becomes incredibly important throughout an NFL season, and this competition may quietly become one of the most valuable on the entire roster. The defensive line rotation will also receive plenty of attention following previous roster changes. Every departure creates opportunity for someone else, and players like Malcolm Roach, Syvian Jones, and others now have additional chances to earn larger roles throughout camp. Coaches will closely evaluate consistency, effort, versatility, and reliability as they determine who deserves regular playing time once the regular season begins. Then there is Jonathan Cooper, whose situation remains another important storyline entering camp. Questions continue surrounding his availability while legal matters remain unresolved. At this point, there is still uncertainty regarding exactly how everything will unfold during training camp and the preseason. Until official decisions are made, everyone will simply continue monitoring developments while allowing the process to play out. Moving to the offensive side again, another competition worth watching is the battle for the backup quarterback position between Jarrett Stidham and Sam Ehlinger. This may not receive as many headlines as other position battles, but it could have meaningful roster implications. Ehlinger has received encouraging reviews, and if he continues performing well throughout training camp and the preseason, Denver faces an interesting decision. Stidham carries a much larger financial commitment, while Ehlinger represents a less expensive option. NFL teams constantly balance performance with roster economics, and if one player clearly separates himself while also providing financial flexibility, those decisions become increasingly difficult to ignore. Preseason games will likely determine everything. Coaches will evaluate decision-making, accuracy, leadership, consistency, command of the offense, and overall execution. The best players should earn the job, regardless of previous expectations or contract size. The overall feeling surrounding the Broncos right now is one of optimism mixed with curiosity. There are still